All right, so good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much to Jerry for hosting me. We've been talking about this for a while, I feel like. It's been a long time.
I think almost 4 years.
Has it been that long? Oh my God, I've given up counting.
Maybe even longer.
Maybe, oh yeah. All right, who's counting? But I'm doing this for nearly 23, it'll be 23 years in January. I know, I'm that old. No, I'm a little older than 23. I'm doing this a really long time. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and a sex therapist, and a relationship coach. And what drove me to work with people who are early on in relationships is I lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in my late 20s. And a lot of people used to approach me about relationship advice. And I used to see how when my mom lived in the Upper West Side before she got married back in the 70s, or the late 60s, 70s, the Upper West Side was like 20 blocks long, and by the time I got to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, it was like 40 blocks long. And now the Upper West Side of Manhattan is people live like, you know, between Upper Harlem and down to Brooklyn, and it's hard. It seems to be harder and harder for people to find love. And so I've been obsessed with the question of what it takes for people to find love, and what is it that's getting in the way of people finding love. And a lot of people also make the mistake of thinking that if you're married, you probably figured it all out, you got all the answers because you found the right one. And as many people know, that's not the case, because finding love is not the same as keeping love, right? There's a process, and we're making the choice to love the person that we want to be with every single day. So just because you find someone that you happen to get together with long enough to get your tefillahs under the chuppah and get that ketubah and have the shavruchas and everything like that, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And we need to know what that is. And it's not just that there's a lot of work, there's a lot of inner work that we need to do in order to literally have space for love. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about, you know, what it is that gets in our way of being able to find and keep love. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, marriage is kind of crazy. It's kind of like being a two-headed monster, right? You think that you both have the same values, and a lot of times people do have the same values. But what happens is people have different ideas about how to go about doing the same things, right? So even though you might get together and you might both think, okay, we want to keep Shabbos and we want to do this together, we want to do that together, and then the way in which you do things could be vastly different. You could think that you have the same ideas about money. You could think that you have the same ideas about going on vacation. You could think we both want to have kids. Okay, well, what does that actually mean to have kids? What does that mean to raise a family? What does that mean to have family dinners together? Are we gonna, have dinners together every night? Are we gonna have it a few times a night? Are we gonna be sitting around singing Kumbaya? Are we gonna be sitting in front of our screens? Like, what does it actually look like? And these are the hard questions that people don't really talk about with each other, but they just think, oh, we both want the same things, but they don't actually get to the nitty-gritty of what that actually means. But that's actually a whole different subject. But today, what I really want to talk about is, I brought 4 case studies. Oh, that's kind of noisy. I brought 4 case studies from clients that I worked with many, many years ago, so the odds of you knowing them is pretty rare. One of them is actually from my days when I lived in Australia. 15 years ago, I made Aliyah exactly 15 years ago on Friday, so it's our Aliyah anniversary. And so one of our case studies is from a client that I worked with almost 20 years ago as well. And basically, I worked with these people on helping them figure out and identify what it was that was getting in the way of finding love, getting through the dating process. And I worked with them, some of them a little bit early on in their relationship, through the dating stages, through the engagement process, and sometimes even early on in marriage. And that was a really great thing, because what happened then was that it enabled them to really set the stage for really keeping the love, keeping the space for love alive, and really being able to know how to have the important conversations that they need to be able to have in order to, feel safe with one another. Okay, so we're going to start with a client, and of course I've changed all the names. I call him Daniel. Like, that's a nice Jewish arbitrary name.
It's a good name.
Pardon? Hey, you know him?
It looks like Jake Gyllenhaal.
It looks like you. It could be. It could be. I mean, it could be a famous person. I don't know. I found it on Pinterest. I found a nice, handsome guy. I figure if you're watching this, then if you're looking at this, then at least you should enjoy the pictures, right? Daniel was an Oleh, although not a recent Oleh. His family sent him over from America to kind of be like the Meragel of the family. He was sent over at the age of 13 by himself to some other auntie who was living here, and he was supposed to figure out what it was that the family needed in order to make a successful aliyah at the ripe old age of 13 years old. So he had the unburdensome, his parents quite burdened him quite a lot with this thing of like figuring out what it is that's going to help us make this successful aliyah. And he felt like a tremendous amount of pressure. But of course he felt like on the one hand he was like torn, because on the one hand he felt like, wow, my parents think I'm so great that they sent me all the way from, across the sea to live with their auntie, and I have this really great responsibility of, figuring out what it is that's going to help us live here and everything like that. So on the one hand he loved the fact that he was given this huge responsibility and that his parents thought really highly of him. But on the other hand, he was like given this task that was like way above his pay grade at the ripe old young age of 13. And he, over time, he became a perfectionist because he felt this huge amount of pressure, right, to make this aliyah successful. And how does this relate to dating? So when he was going out with women, he was always finding flaws and faults with all the women that he dated, right? Every single woman he would go out with, she wasn't pretty enough, she wasn't smart enough, she wasn't interesting enough, she wasn't who knows what. There was always this not enough thing. And so I turned to him and I said, what is it that feels not enough inside of you? And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? And he realized that actually he was projecting his own feelings of not enoughness onto the people that he was dating, onto the women that he was dating. And this was a major turning point for him because he was always looking out, he was never looking in. And when he was able to really turn things around and say, what is it that I need, in order to feel more okay? And what is it that makes, how can I like lower the tension and the pressure that I'm putting on myself? He was really able to really let things go. And he started like dating a lot more with a lot less pressure. And he was really able to see more possibilities. And what interestingly ended up happening was he ended up dating a woman who was in his chevra. Like he knew her for years and years and years. And he just never thought of her as a possibility because he never thought, he just wasn't seeing any possibilities. He didn't think any of the people in his general spiva were for him. And this was a woman who was nothing like the other women that he went out with. This woman was not as intellectual as he was. He was a scientist and very meduyak about everything. She was completely the opposite. She was much more chafif, and she was much more artistic, and she was much more emotional. He was very, very analytical about every little thing. And nevertheless, he really felt attracted to her, and he really enjoyed, being with her. And so they dated for a while, and there was a lot of questions along the way. There was a lot of hesitancy. It wasn't easy breezy. And then as they were getting closer to engagement, he wanted to bring her in and just make sure that everything was working out okay. And they realized that as they got closer to the engagement period, they started like realizing they had to make like these big ticket decisions, like these purchase big things and stuff like that. That's when things started to get a little shaky because they had vastly different ideas about how to do things. And that's when he was like, that's it. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I need to like do tons of research when I make a decision, right? And the way she makes a decision is she goes into a shop, she says, I need a pillow, and she just buys a pillow. And he would like go to a shop and he'd be like, he'd do all the research on all the pillows that existed. And he'd be, and like he would know exactly all the ins and outs of every single item that he wanted to purchase. And she's like, I'm never going to make it like this. We've got like a bazillion things to buy. We've got, a whole house to set up. How are we going to do this? And so, whatever. Bottom line is we worked through all these different things. We helped them get to a happy medium. And then they came back to me again as they were early on in their marriage. They were setting their house up again. And they had all these big decisions to make as well there. And once again, there was a lot of stress and tension that came up and that happens for everybody, and it's normal, right? And the thing is, a lot of people don't realize these things are normal. And then they start to question themselves. They start to say, did I really marry the right person? You know, we think so differently from each other. We're so, you know, she thinks black and I think white, and how are we going to come to the same conclusions about things? And, you know, if she wants a blue kitchen and I want, you know, a white kitchen, you're like, I don't see how we're going to do this. You know, I just don't know. And it's terrifying for people. I'm making light of this, you know. But the truth is, it's terrifying for people. People really have, you know, very, very fixed ideas in their minds about how they want to do things. And they're married to somebody who has a very vastly different idea about the same thing. It can be really, really terrifying. And people can think that they're making a mistake. And the biggest thing that they need to do is just to lower the tension. They need somebody else in the room to help them to just see that things are going to be okay and really be able to break down and decipher, like, what's something that you really need to fight for and what's something that you could just chill out and let go, and how to find these happy mediums. And so really learning how to have conversations around these things is a really, really important thing, right? And oftentimes these tensions flare up and people get really stressed out and they don't know how to calm themselves down, right? And so a lot of this is really being able to just calm the nervous system down so that you don't end up doing things that push people away. Okay, so that's what we did with Daniel. So what did we learn from Daniel? So some of the things you might not remember because I mentioned this a little while ago is some of the issues that we had to deal with him in order to create more space was we had to work on his self-image, right? He had a bit of self-image issues because he put so much pressure on himself, right? And he was really feeling, and instead of really being able to feel good about himself, he was projecting all these negative things onto the other women and saying that they weren't attractive when he wasn't feeling that way himself. And he was also dating the wrong women for him. I didn't really talk about this very much, but he was often going for these women who were like, you know, these supermodel-y types, or that's what he thought he really wanted. And he didn't realize that he really needed a nice, warm, emotional woman. He also thought he needed, you know, there were a lot of things that he thought he needed. He thought he needed women who were analytical and who were more, you know, intellectual and who were going to really challenge him on all these different things in certain ways, but he didn't realize that he actually needs to be challenged in different ways. And the perfectionism issue was a big one, really being able to say, I don't need things to be exactly the way I think I need them to be. It's about really being able to find more balance and caring too much about what other people think and having an overemphasis on needing to make other people happy, and in particular his parents. So these are some issues that you might find within yourself as well. And if these are some of the things that you might be struggling with, these are things you want to challenge yourself on. Okay, so let's talk about my next case study. A client I worked with many, many years ago is a woman that we call Anne. She was, when she came to work with me, she was 30. She had made Aliyah as a small child as well. And her parents were very, very busy when she first made Aliyah. They were really, really struggling to make ends meet. And she really didn't feel that they had a lot of time and space for her. And she learned from them how to really fill up her this emotional void, right? And she too became very, very busy. And she was dating, and never really feeling excited or attracted to anybody. And she was often getting very, very frustrated. Her friends were getting married one after the other, and she'd gone through many, many friendship groups by the time she'd come to work with me. And she was feeling like, whoa. That cat has gotta go. Everybody awake now? She was feeling really down in the dumps and really alone. And she was feeling like this is never gonna happen. And what she didn't realize until she came to work with me was that she was just filling herself up so much. She was so busy all the time, and she wasn't making any space to do the things that really made her feel alive and that made her feel fun. And one of the things that she realized that really kept her alive and made her feel really excited about life as a young child was dance, right? And that's something that she hadn't done in years and years and years. And so so that was something that she started to incorporate into her life. She cut down her work schedule. She realized she was just working too hard. She wasn't making enough space to do things that she felt was really fun and enjoyable. And she cut her work down. And then all of a sudden, a few months after she's cut down her work schedule and started doing fun things and started just relaxing and chilling, she realized there was a guy who lived just down the corner who she had never noticed before. She just never did. He was also an Ole like her. He made Aliyah when he was, a young child as well. They had so much in common. He also loved to dance, like how many Jewish guys like to dance, right? I figured out who it is already. There's just that many of you, right? They just really hit it off. And so, they also came to me early on, in the relationship because they were a little concerned that, they also didn't see perfectly eye to eye. Of course, they had differences as well. And one of the big differences that they had was the whole issue of mixed dancing, right? I can't remember which one it was. One of them was into it and one of them wasn't. I can't remember which one it is now. It's that long ago. But somehow, I remember what it was. She wanted to go clubbing, and he was like very against this. And but the compromise that they came to was that she was going to go clubbing, but she was only going to dance with her girlfriends, and he was going to like hang out on the side, and then they would like hang out together, and then once they got married, it wasn't even an issue anymore. They just decided to just dance at home, and that's how they dealt with that. But basically, her issue in terms of what was taking up Anne's space was this feeling of not being able to set good boundaries for herself, right? She was always filling up her space, filling up the void that she felt inside of her, and she wasn't able to say, this is right for me, this isn't right for me, and she wasn't able to learn that because she really didn't have the support that she needed from her parents, right? Her parents weren't really there for her in a very deep emotional way, and so she really didn't learn good boundaries. She didn't learn like how much work I should do, how much work I shouldn't do, and things like this, and this is something that she had to learn over time. And she didn't know how to differentiate between her expectations and other people's expectations, right? She felt that because her parents were real workaholics, wow, I'm having a hard time breathing. Can we lower the fire a little bit, please? I'm just like, whew, it's intense. She felt that her parents had this sort of unwritten expectation that she should be working all the time, and she didn't realize that actually didn't really work for her. She didn't feel like she was alive. She didn't feel like she was living. And because she didn't feel like she was alive, really, she was just sapped. Her energy was completely sapped, and she wasn't able to feel love, right? And so she was misplacing energy, and she was just, as they say in Hebrew, she was skuta. She was completely, how do you say skuta? She was completely sapped, right? Is that the way we say skuta, right? Like, no energy. Hey? Depleted. Hey?
Yeah,
depleted. Is that the right? Yeah.
No, I didn't say that, but that's the right word.
That is the right word.
That's the right word.
Okay. She was just depleted. She just had nothing. It's like she had nothing left in the tank. And when we have nothing left in the tank, it's not sexy, right? What's sexy is when we feel alive, when we feel energetic. We need to feel alive and energetic in order to invite people in, right? So this woman, Anne, had no space to see what was right in front of her until she finally was able to fill up her tank with something that really energized her and made her come alive, and that's really when it was able to happen for her. Okay? So that is Anne. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, ideas? We can make it a little interactive. Anybody at all? No pressure. Am I just clear as crystal? Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
You guys are all so quiet. I just feel like we need to.
We're with you. We're the
You're
same.
with me?
We're the
Okay.
same.
I wasn't sure, but it gets very quiet. I get a little nervous. Okay. So that was Anne. Okay. So now, okay, you know what? I'm going to skip over Heather for just a moment. We're going to talk about Johnny. Johnny is a client of mine from Australia. He's really a client that's very, very near and dear to my heart. I learned so much from this man. He came to me with his girlfriend at the time. They came to me because actually they had a bit of a violent relationship. And he thought he was absolutely smitten by, we're going to call her Amanda. We call her Amanda, we'll call her Amanda. He thought he was completely smitten by his girlfriend Amanda. And the thing is like this. He used to say to me, Amanda had this travel brochure, right? Does anybody know do you know what a travel brochure is anymore? Right, I talk about this sometimes, right?
It's got pictures.
Yeah.
Hey?
It's got pictures of places and a little description.
Right. Right. Now, it's the old Instagram, right? Before we had Instagram and Facebook and before like social media came around, right? You had travel brochures. When you wanted to go somewhere, you get a little travel brochure and have a little picture and have a little description. And of course, just like on Airbnb, where you think you're going to this beautiful place, you rent out this beautiful apartment, and then you get there and it's like, holy heavens, how could this be that thing? Like, no, this can't be like that. And it was kind of like that with Amanda. She had this travel brochure that she led this like really clean, squeaky clean life. She was very like a really good girl, Yaldat Tova Yerushalayim, let's say, even though She wasn't from Yerushalayim at all. But she was like, the good girl, right? That's what she supposedly was. And he really was looking for a really clean living, very healthy person. He himself he formerly played tennis. He was in the Australian Open, not like one of the major tennis guys. It wasn't like Rod Laver or anybody like that. Or any of the, he wasn't not like Leighton Hewitt, but, someone like ranked like 50 or something. And he was a very, very healthy guy. He ran, he boxed, he drove cars. He was like really fit and did all the things. He ate super clean, all this sort of stuff. And Amanda did not do that. She partied hard, she went to raves and did all this sort of thing. But like when they first started dating, she was like, no, I'm also not into drugs. And I really want to have a really clean life, and I really want to be very healthy, and all these things. And she just, she obviously wants to put out this great travel brochure, but she actually was very much the opposite. But anyway, point is, so after a short while, it became very clear that they just wanted vastly different lives. They had completely different values. And he was really gutted because it was really hard for him to come down. He was like, I'm marrying this travel brochure, but the travel brochure and the person, they don't match. They're not working out. And it was really hard for him to reconcile that and make sense of that. And this is something that he would do a lot, right? And he was finding that he was just attracted to the bad girl, so to speak, often, even though that's not what he said he wanted. And he would date this kind of girl again and again. And we did this dating history, which I often do with the clients I work with, and we'd see all the women, we'd line them all up, and the women that he was dating were just like one bad apple after another, like these women that just treated him like garbage. And so I have to say, what is going on here? Why is it that why are you dating women that are treating you so badly? Like, this guy had seemingly pretty good self-esteem, he had a great job, he was in the fashion industry, he was flying high, he was super creative, he had lots of friends, really alamilas. Why are you attracting women who are treating you like garbage? And so what we discovered was that there was this little part of him that felt really, really yucky. Why? When he was a young boy, his father passed away. He died of cancer at a very young, he was very young. His father actually died in his arms. And even though he had nothing to do with his death, somehow he developed this belief system that he killed his father. He felt that he should have done more to help his father survive. He should have, his father died of lung cancer. He said he felt he should have known he was going to die of cancer, and he should have stolen his cigarettes and chucked them in the bin. And he knew that, cigarettes cause cancer, and he knew that his father shouldn't have smoked, and he felt personally responsible for his father's death. I mean, it's crazy, right? It sounds like it doesn't make any sense. But, so that's just one part of the piece. The other thing is, when his father died, he became the man of the house. It was him, his mom, and his sister. And his mom completely fell apart. I mean, she just really lost it, and she went into a deep, deep depression, and she wasn't functioning anymore. And his oldest sister as well. And so he was completely on his own. He had really nobody looking after him. He had no grandparents, he had no family. He lived out in the middle of Whoop in Australia. He had nobody around him. And he decided he wasn't gonna let himself fall apart. He started farming, he started making his own food, literally. He really lifted himself up, and he started, somehow he got into training. That's how he got into tennis. And he really, made a real life for himself, even as a small child. But because he had such a terrible feeling about himself, he didn't believe that he was worthy and deserving of love. He didn't feel that he was worthy and deserving of a woman to love him. And so that's why he was attracting women who made him, he felt this was the best I could do. And he didn't allow himself to really think beyond, to really see who he really was and see the wonderful person that he actually really was. And so that was a lot of the work that we had to do. We had to really get him to really recognize, that he really was this really wonderful person. He had a lot of anger inside, naturally, from what he grew up with. It was really, really challenging. So we had to clear that stuff out and replace it with the person that he really is, and really get him to see his own travel brochure, right? And get him to see what it is that he really wants to attract and what it is that he really needs for a relationship, and allow himself to believe that he is worthy of good things. Okay, so what did we learn from Johnny? What was the space that was being taken up from Johnny? Definitely his anger, his belief that he was unlovable. He had a major fear of abandonment, right? Because everybody in his life basically abandoned him, his father by his death. His mother, by virtue of the fact that she just was incapacitated and wasn't functioning, choosing women who, just gave him a rush, that wasn't really doing it for him. He just didn't feel he was able to really trust anybody. He wasn't able to trust his own decisions. He didn't feel he was able to believe in himself. And of course he had unresolved grief over the loss of his father. And this man was wounded and traumatized. So what we need to do is we needed to really heal all that stuff and get him into a better space. Okay.
How did you do that?
So, really good therapy. That's what we did. But I'm going to talk about how I do it now. How I did it then and how I do it now are a little bit different. Basically, we'll get there in just a moment. We're going to talk about that. Okay. So, basically what we've spoken about up until now is that there's a lot of different barriers to love, right? There's things like loss, oftentimes, right? We lose people in our lives, or we have friendships that somehow go off into, never land, or just people just suddenly, drop out. A lot of people move houses and things, and then their friends that were very close to them disappear, or they lose grandparents, or people that were like their primary caregivers, right? Those are really hard things, and some people don't really know how to process them. They just kind of detach themselves. They just think that they could just move on. But oftentimes these things leave indelible marks on our bodies and our minds, right? Things that impact our good feelings about ourselves, oftentimes, take away from our good feelings about who we are. And we have unresolved feelings, fear, anger, frustration, sadness, right? All these different emotions, right? A lot of times these emotions are swimming around inside of us, and we're not really dealing with them. We're not really processing them. And so when we don't really process these feelings, they just form blocks inside of us, right? So, so basically these things, they all take up a lot of space. Now, what's your
Daniel.
name? Daniel. Oh, Daniel.
Yeah, I was the first one.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So how do these blockages work? Okay. So basically, let's just imagine for a moment. Let's imagine this is your brain, right? Okay. And let's imagine that this is the reptilian part of your brain, right? The reptilian part of your brain is responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, and basic bodily functions, right? And then we got the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. And then on top of that sits the neocortex, the rational thinking part of the brain. And when we experience some sort of trauma, right, our brain just sort of pops, it just gets out of whack. The rational jumps out, the emotional jumps out, and all you're left with is the fight, flight, and freeze response, right? The reptilian part of the brain, which is kind of useless. This is the stuff that, like, the lizards and the things that crawl on the ground, snakes and stuff. That's all they operate with, right? And that's all we're operating with when the rational and the emotional aren't all operating together. And the reptilian part of the brain is connected to the central nervous system, which is made up of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The sympathetic nervous system is the thing that gets your body all wired and working together, right? It's the thing that it the heart rate, digestion, urination, defecation, sex drive, all that sort of stuff should be alive and kicking, and the sympathetic nervous system is what's often helping that happen. But what happens is when we have some sort of traumatic response, right, things don't go, our organs don't work so well, they don't function so well, right? Sometimes they work too much, too fast, or work too slow. And what's supposed to happen is the parasympathetic is supposed to come in and say, okay, everybody, we could calm down, everybody, we could go back to our normal bodily functioning, except what happens is sometimes that doesn't happen. And our body is still kicking into overdrive, and we've got cortisol and adrenaline and all these hormones are pouring into our bodies because we still think that we still fear that we still need to go into fight, flight, and freeze mode. And the problem is if we haven't healed whatever that trauma is, we're going to be in those modes all the time. And this is something I hear about time and time again. In fact, just today, I heard a story. A Shatfanit called me because she wanted to, ask me a question about a guy that she's been trying to set up. And he was married to somebody who really, I'm not going to get into the details, but really did a number on him and really, traumatized him, let's just say. And the problem is he's kind of like anti-therapy. She said, I don't know what to do. And I explained to her how, what's really happening for this guy. What seems to be happening is he is so scared about getting into another relationship. He wants to get into another relationship because most of us want to be in a relationship, right? We are all our brains are basically wired for love. But what happens is a lot of times we're petrified, right? If we've been in relationships that weren't satisfying for us or traumatized us to some degree or other, we go into fight, flight, and freeze mode. And what needs to happen is we need to literally unplug our systems, right? That's why I've got this picture of the pipe here, right? That's what I do. I do human plumbing, right?
Wow.
I figure out where the blockage is, and I help you to discharge it. I help you to release it. And I'm going to tell you exactly how you do it, right? Is I when a person comes to me, you're all excited, right? I know, it's very exciting. It's really exciting stuff. For anybody who's done this, it can be really fun and exciting, right? So what you do is you figure out, I'll ask people, is there a color, a shape, a texture inside of the body, right? And that's going to tell me exactly where the blockage is, right? So sometimes it's in your heart, sometimes it's in your stomach, sometimes in your lungs, sometimes it's in some other part of your kishkas, right? And you'll start to think about it, and then I'll ask, is there some sort of image that comes up? Is there some sort of meaning? Does it make you want to do something? Do you want to punch the crap out of somebody? Do you want to kick somebody? Do you want to, And then you release it from your body through a natural breath, through goosebumps, through yawning, through some sort of there's natural ways that our body is programmed to release the schmutz from our bodies. And our bodies need to do that, but sometimes we need a little help in order to do that, right? And then once we release all that stuff, then we could create what's called a corrective experience, right? So sometimes I'll ask people to think, okay, so this thing happened to you, and what would you like to imagine would be the opposite of that? Or if anything were possible, what would you like to do? If that person who traumatized you, let's say, if you could speak to that person, if you could tell that person how badly they treated you and help them understand that what they did was so wrong, what would you like to tell them, right? And so creating these corrective experiences literally rewires our body. It helps to discharge and release the schmutz that we're holding onto, and helps us to think about completely different ways to do things. And it literally helps create space for love inside of our bodies. I know it sounds a little too good to be true, but let me tell you, it really, really does work. It really does. It's amazing stuff. If I didn't experience it, but I experienced it for myself. I've been working with this tool for over 10 years now. It's called somatic experience therapy, and it is phenomenal. It is, as they say, it is the bomb. It is really good. Okay, so let's just go back a little bit. I know I kind of like went a little forward, but so how do blockages get in the way of love? Like, how does it look? How does it manifest? So what happens is sometimes it makes us self-sabotage, right? Sometimes people say, like, I know I'm constantly, right? Maybe this is some of you guys, right? I know that every time I meet someone who likes me, I constantly, I test them out. I really, I play with them, and I really try to see, like, how long is this person gonna put up with my crap, right? Anybody do that? What can I do to, like, really see if this person's gonna stay? But the problem is, what happens? People give up. They're like, no, I don't want to deal with this garbage, and they leave, right? And why do people do that? Because oftentimes, they had what's called an anxious attachment style. And this is John Bowlby's theory. Anyone familiar with attachment theory, right? John Bowlby, secure, anxious, avoidant attachment styles, right? So people with anxious attachment styles, they're the ones that are going to be testing you, or you might be the one that's doing the testing, right? And the anxious attachment people, they're going to be like, I don't really believe that anyone's going to really stay around with me. So they're constantly, they love to play those games. But what happens is they push people away, and then no one really wants to stay, and then people just give up. So that's the self-sabotage thing. Sometimes what happens is people get too close for comfort, right? The avoidant attachers, right? They get terrified when people show them, like, when people really love them and do nice things for them. They're like, whoa, what is this? Why are you doing nice things for me? That doesn't make any sense, right? Because they didn't grow up with a model of people who showed them love. And so even though in their minds, or in their, they know in theory that people are supposed to do good things for them, when people do good things for the avoidant type people, right, they just get terrified because they're not really familiar with it. It's just not they're not wired that way, right? And so sometimes when we're not, sometimes the way the blockages work is we get blindsided from seeing possibilities, like the story of, I think it was Anne, right? Where she was so busy just thinking she had to make herself busy and work. She couldn't even see different possibilities in front of her because she just told herself, I just have to work all the time, and then love will just come somewhere, I don't know where, right? Or, and sometimes for people, intimacy feels really scary. Like they know they really want to connect with somebody, But then when the people get too close to them, even like emotionally, it feels terrifying, right? And they don't know what to do with that, and then they push that away. Sometimes we get confused about what we really want, right? We think we want one thing because we've been told all this time, right? Like Daniel, the first example, right? He thought all this time he needed this deep intellectual woman that he was going to have all these like brilliant conversations with, and he was going to talk about the cosmos and this and that. But then he realized, but wait a minute, I don't really need a woman to talk about the stars with. I could actually just talk to her about, normal day-to-day stuff, right? We could just have normal, conversations about things. And so sometimes what happens is we act out rather than really just expressing how we really feel. And when we act out, right, that sometimes turns people off, right? And that forms blockages.
Act
right?
out?
Pardon?
What do you mean by act out?
Act out, meaning we don't actually say what we want, right? And so we just behave in ways that are turn-offy, right? Anybody have an example of acting out? Anybody think of maybe something that they've done, or a friend, not you, your friend. What do your friends do that's like acting out? Anybody have any friends like that?
Pretending not to care or being like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Squatting your shoulders.
Whatevs. I don't really need you. Whatevs. Talk to the hand, right? Like not really being open and honest about how you feel about somebody, right? So you sort of play hard to get, play cold, and hope that the person will just, see past that. Right? That's a form of acting out. Yeah. I mean, playing hard to get, I guess, is the biggest example that I have. Or sometimes, like, even being too, dare I say, too, like, needy. I mean, it sounds, I hate that expression, because it's what that means is, it's like being too in your face and not finding that balance, right? And there's no such thing as too needy. We should all be able to express how we really feel about somebody, but sometimes when you do it too hard and you're not sort of like in the same wavelength as the person that you're dating, that can be a little bit terrifying, right? So you have to kind of test the waters a little bit and see where the other person is at and not go too hard on things, right? Okay. So there's a lot of different things that we all do to subconsciously fill our space, right? And we talked about that with a lot of these different examples, but I want to go through them again. Sometimes we might work extra long hours and we tell ourselves, but I really, really have to do this job. I really, really need I really need to be running 3 hours a day. I really need to be doing chesed work. I need to be doing so much chesed work, and that's so important. I do all this chesed work, right? And people don't realize that by doing all these things that they're actually subconsciously taking away space from allowing love to come in. So we fill our times with things that just sap our energy, and we don't look after ourselves. Some of us abuse ourselves. We don't really look after ourselves. We don't live like good, balanced lives, and we just work ourselves too hard, or we take things that aren't really good for our bodies, right? We aren't in balance. And sometimes we fill ourselves up with all these things just to dull the pain of not having intimacy. I'll take a question in a moment. And what that does is it's really just taking away space from really being able to see possibilities and let people into our lives. Or we create relationships with people who are just space fillers, right? We don't really feel connected to people. We have these superficial relationships that's just taking up space. Like, these people who just have they're friends with everybody, but they don't really have any real deep connections with people. That's called space filling. That's not really filling yourself up in a way that's really nourishing, that's really making you feel good. So all of these things, basically, they decrease our ability to feel attractive, and then we push people away because people think this person is too busy, they just don't have space for love. Sorry, Daniel, you wanted to ask a question. It's a mess.
Do you think that there's it looks like my place.
Clean that up.
It's organized, you can walk.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a different times and spaces for people to focus on these different areas, like doing chesed, having friends, finding the people, and then once going through all of that, finding this working, and then getting to a space where they're comfortable enough to start dating or looking for a relationship in a more
So I think we need to do all these. We need to have all these things happening. It's just that it's just doing it in the right measure, right?
so balance
It's about finding the right balance. It's balance is the spice of life, right? Because we just have to make sure that we have a nice, healthy balance. So we're not like, we're not burning the midnight oil all the time to the point where we just are completely sapped and we have no energy. And that's just one element.
I'm just thinking like people should just be them. That's part of finding the right person. So if somebody starts like they naturally get very busy and do all these things, and they start in order to find like a guy and make space, they start making their schedule more empty, and then then the guy comes into their life, and then they get back to their natural state, and it's like, who is this? Where am I in your space? And then they realize that's that woman's personality. So if they just acted like themselves, they would bring that guy that's also really busy and is the kind of guy that like we meet up and so on. Like, and then
I mean, there are people. I hear what you're saying. There are people that are just like really crazy busy people. But even those crazy busy people, somehow they do hopefully find some space.
But I'm even
in
just
their
using
lives.
this as an example. Like sometimes people do certain things that like we say, that will help you find your person.
Yeah.
But then they start doing things to help them find their person, and they're just not being them anymore. And then they find the wrong person.
That happens too. Absolutely. So but that's exactly an example of just like filling your space with stuff that's not helping to clear the energies that the right person can come in. Because if you're not if you're not like the person who's like naturally very busy and whatever, and you're just doing things that go against your natural way of being, then that's definitely going to attract the wrong kind of person in. Because then the person, you're going to attract people who think, oh wow, she's the little miss busy person. And then she's like, well, actually, I don't really want to be that busy person. Actually, the person who wants to just chill on the couch and drink pina coladas all day. So that's not going to fly.
is that like the Amanda story?
The Johnny and Amanda story. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I think what happened. I think what happened with Amanda was she was very smitten. I mean, Johnny was a really attractive guy, and I think she just thought, wow,
I'll change for him.
Hey?
I'll change for him.
I'm going to tell him that this is how I am, even though this is not how I am at all. Yeah, and then she couldn't keep it up. She couldn't keep it up because she just wasn't that way. But I think she really wasn't in a space to be in a relationship at that point anyways. I forgot to mention to you that I ended up working with Johnny on his own, so I really don't know what happened to Amanda. I only saw Johnny and Amanda for very few sessions, and then Johnny, I think Amanda broke up with Johnny. They got back together back and forth a few times, so she like made appearances in his life, but I didn't work with her anymore. And then I just worked with Johnny, and then we really helped him. Yeah, so that's why I kind of, sorry, I didn't say that. I kind of focused more on Johnny and helping clear up his space. The other thing I didn't mention to you about Johnny, which is really an important thing to note, is that what ended up happening with him was that once he became more clear about what it was that he needed, he actually ended up, marrying a woman who was a psychologist, which was completely different to the other women. He used to go out with these women who were really, he was in the fashion industry, so he was constantly surrounded by these beautiful women who were like, into fashion and stuff like that, and but they just really weren't kind of doing it for him, and he ended up finding a woman. I can't remember. I think he went. I think he was like in Vegas at some show or whatever, and she happened to be there, and they met in Vegas.
Cool.
I know. Whatever stays in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas, right?
Going back to the busyness example, let's say you project the idea of yourself and it's not who you are.
Yeah.
But you've been doing it for so long that that's the projection that like people are receiving. So that's what you're gonna. It's just reinforcing an idea of yourself of who you think you are. How do you get back in touch with who you are minus all the space fillers?
That's such an important question. It's really, that's what happens. I think is a lot of times. I think that's what happened with Daniel, is that people had this idea about him. He was constantly thinking he has to be like Mr. Perfect, right? And he had to say to himself, actually, I don't need to be this Mr. Perfection guy. That's not working for me. So it's about like really understanding what is the narrative that you've been fed all these years, or that you've told yourself all these years, and then being able to say, hang on a minute, I don't need to do that anymore. That's not working for me. And I'll ask my clients that all the time. I'll say, okay, so you've been person X all these years. This is your persona. This is what you're doing. How's that working for you? And like a woman I was working with said to me once. She said she only likes guys that she only likes guys that aren't attracted to her. And I said, well, how's that working for you? You know, is that you know, are you finding that you end up having relationships with guys that don't want to be with you? Like, is that really what you want to be with? Do you really want a guy who doesn't want to be with you, who's you're going to have to constantly be proving yourself to? Like, oh, we gotta kill the fire, guys.
Yeah.
Woo! It's intense, baby. Okay, this house is literally on fire.
Smoking us out.
Okay, so yeah, you gotta ask yourself, is this way that I'm being, is it really working for me? Or do I need to like have a personality shift? And you could do that, but it takes some work. It just takes a bit of awareness. Actually, that's what I'm talking about right now, right? It's about, well, I'll get to it in a second, but basically it's about really having some awareness about what it is that you really want to attract and how you want to be. So what does dating look like? We'll talk about that in a second. We'll get back to it. So basically, what does dating look like when we don't have enough space, right? So we develop relationships in a superficial way, and when we date, we often keep people at arm's length. We play games. We challenge the men that we date, or the people that we date. Sorry, it's in the female. I know we got a lot of men here. It's really exciting. Very happy you're here, by the way. We challenge the people that we date, and they often give up and they lose interest over time if they're smart. Sometimes they hang on, but oftentimes they will lose interest. Or we make excuses for why things don't work out, right? We make excuses for why things don't work out with the good ones, right? And I chose this picture of Sheryl Sandberg. I actually created this presentation before Sheryl lost her husband. Sheryl, funnily enough, has since lost her husband and married another guy, and she's a real sign of success because I think she's a sign of a woman who's very much in touch with herself, and she's very aware of what she wants, and I think she really goes for things. So I think she's a really wonderful role model for both for men and women alike, really. But what makes us successful in all areas? But oftentimes we fail in love, and this is something that happens a lot, and this is also something that really takes up a lot of our space from finding love. Is right. What happens is we often do what feels natural for us, right? We like to do what, you know, when we do what makes us feel good, we want to do more of it. It's a self-reinforcing, self-fulfilling kind of thing, right? And so we do whatever makes us feel successful. We have this positive feedback loop that's saying, you're good, you're successful, keep doing that, keep going, and then it just like fuels these endorphins in our brain, and we just keep going and going and going. And then what happens is our careers nourish us, and they nourish us in ways that oftentimes we're not getting that same feedback from dating, right? If we're constantly being rejected from the people we go out with, or we go out with people that we don't feel really match us, or we're really making a lot of efforts with that, and then we're not, yielding the fruits of our labor, and we just think, we put in so much effort, and then you have a however many month-long relationship, and the relationship fails, and you think, why did I do that? That just makes no sense, right? But what people don't see is that even if you put a lot of effort into a relationship and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you failed. That means that you've learned a lot about yourself. And what I always say to people, I must say, I'm often a little bit jealous of single people not because I don't love my husband and I think he's great and I think I did really well for myself, and I'm actually really quite happy and proud. You hear that, Gabby? Talking to you. But I'm jealous of single people because I feel like dating is like the best PhD in relationships. And I oftentimes think if I were to go back and do it all over again, not that I want to do it again, but if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would do it so differently. The way that I would do it is I would, like, every person I would date, I would just really try to see how can I learn as much about myself as possible. And that's something that yes, you get to do that when you're married, but like, it's different when you're like going out with like different people and you get to see how these different people like nourish you and charge you and make you feel like all these different things. And then as you date, you kind of develop this composite of, okay, now I have a sense of what it is, the kind of person I really want to have in my life. I've learned that I need someone who's like low energy so that I could like have higher, like I could really do most of the talking. Or I've learned that I need someone who is gonna like have really good time management. Or I've learned that I need somebody who's like really neat and tidy, right? You know what, actually I don't really need that at all. I need someone who's not gonna be so on top of things. I remember I dated this guy once we were talking many years ago. We're actually celebrating our 23rd wedding anniversary on Sunday. Thank you very much. Yes. So, many years ago, I remember I was dating this guy who was a really lovely, wonderful man, and he had serious OCD. And what do I mean? I'm so old. I dated back in the time we had CDs and CD players in the car. Do you remember that, right? And he had this whole CD collection, and I was going through his CD collection, and I'm not like so neat and tidy. Like I try to be, but like I just play that on TV. I'm not really a neat and tidy person, and so I was like going through his CD collection in the car, and he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you didn't put the CD in the right place." Like it wasn't that I didn't even put the CD back in the cover. I didn't put it. Was like in chronological order. He went absolutely mental and blown on me. I was like, "Whoa, I cannot handle this. If this is how he is with his CD collection, could you only imagine? He probably has his shirts and like, every little." I'm like, "No, this is just not gonna fly." Luckily, I got to see that on the date, and like it didn't work out, and I just moved right along. But my point is that when we're dating, it is such an opportunity for us to really encounter and see what it is that we need, what nourishes us, what fuels us, what makes us feel really good. By the way, he actually married the girl after me, so I was his ranger leg. So I feel like I really helped him to figure out that he needed a woman who's going to be very excited about the fact that his CD collection is very well organized. Among other things, he's a very well organized guy. But the point is, dating can be a really great thing if you do it well and you do it right and you do it often. Moving right along. Above all else, you have to guard our heart from everything you do. For everything you do flows from that, right? We have to really protect our heart. We have to really make sure that everything in our body is running and flowing in the way that we need it to flow in order for us to really be able to invite love in. So, how can we clear the space and become more successful in love? So, I know I'm rehashing some of the things that I talked about before, but basically what we need to do is we need to become more aware. This is what we were talking about a moment ago. We need to become more aware of the barriers that are getting in the way of finding love, right? Lots of times, we're just making the same mistakes over and over and over again, but we don't know why, right? We need to understand what is getting in the way, right? With the Johnny example, he didn't understand why he was attracting, these women that treated him like garbage. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what he was projecting that was inviting these women into his life, that was making him not, attract women that were treating him well. You need to become aware of that. And then you need to remove the trauma and the scars that are inside of you. And you need to replace these negative things with positive things and positive thoughts and positive feelings. You need to clear out the old and create space for the new. Right?
Wow.
And so that brings me to the idea of a workshop. Now, I know we got some single people here, we got some married people here, or soon to be married people here. And so what I'd like to offer all you guys is two different kinds of workshops. So we've got, we've got two different kinds of workshops. For the single people, I've got a workshop that I call Create Space for Love. And for the married people, we've got a workshop called Hold Me Tight. And I'll describe what each of these things are. Okay? So the idea of both of these workshops, by the way, even though one's for singles and one's for married, is that what we all need to work on is differentiation. The biggest mistake that people make when they get married is they think that they're marrying their other half. They're marrying somebody who is going to complete them. And that is the biggest bunch of gobbledygook that there is. You are not marrying your other half. What I like to think of is a married couple is equal to 300%, right? You've got 100, each of you is, like the wife is 100%, and the husband is another 100%, and together you make 300%. Now I know you're thinking my maths is bad, and you are right. I do have bad math, but not today. Because even though 100 and 100 really make 200, yes, I do know that. But really, when you marry somebody who's really right for you, and when you really know how to work your marriage, it's not just about marrying the right person, it's about knowing how to work your marriage and knowing how to really create a great relationship. You're actually creating a lot more than the sum of the parts. Right? So you need to be two very, very differentiated people. What that means is that when your partner says something to you that ticks you off, that you don't fly off the handle and you don't lose your, you know what, you're able to keep it together, and you're able to keep your cool, and you're able to keep your calm, and he's able to do that, or she's able to do that as well, right? And you're able to say, like, even though we have different ideas about doing things, that's okay. We can do that. We could both have different ideas, and we could talk about it, and we know how to feel okay about the fact that we have different ways of doing things, right? And that's the aim of the game there, right? The other thing is I incorporate a concept called emotionally focused couples therapy, and it's done. I do this with individuals as well. And basically, what it is really thinking about. It's really understanding the emotional components of what it is that you're bringing to the table. And I incorporate another thing that we talked about before called somatic experience therapy. That's the human plumbing thing that we do. So both of these workshops, both the my battery's low. Both the individual workshop, the Create Space for Love workshop, and the couples workshop, they incorporate all these different things in there. And basically, these aren't exactly the dates of the workshop because it's a little bit up in the air because of the hugging and everything like that. But basically, the idea of these workshops is it normalizes our issues by doing it in a group, by doing this sort of work in the group. We receive support from everybody else. We practice expressing our needs in a very safe way, and we learn from one another's experiences. And so, so that's, I really kind of describe the individual work. Are there married? There are a few married people here as well, right? There's a couple of married people here as well. So the Hold Me Tight workshop, the way that it works is it's really helping to understand what fuels the couple dynamic. Every single couple in the world will have some sort of dynamic that they're perpetuating that's often kind of pulling them apart a little bit. And I'm not saying that means that you have a bad marriage. I'm just saying that the more that you are aware of the dynamic that's kind of tripping you up, that gets in your way, and you understand what's making each of you play your different parts, and what's fueling the emotional components of the dynamic. And when you're able to sort of step out of that and be able to say, understand what's making you do those things, then you're able to turn the dynamic around very, very differently and completely. I could talk to you more about this. I feel like, I'm starting to lose you guys. It's been a long night. It's already 9:30. So basically, for those of you who are interested in the Create Space for Love, that's you can take a picture of the barcode for that. If you guys are interested in the Hold Me Tight, then the barcode is over here. If you have any questions about any of these things, I'd love to hear from you. And if, now's a good opportunity. Yeah.
Yes. About that perfectionism thing where people think that they're not enough, things like that. How does a person know, if they're being a perfectionist or if they actually do, have something more to work on, or something, that maybe a person's standard is not that crazy. How do you know if you actually need to meet a certain standard,
right, or
if you're just putting too much pressure on yourself?
So if I could reframe the question, I guess what I'm understanding to say is, how do I know it's a problem or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it working for you? It's really as simple as that. If being perfectionist is working for you and you're achieving whatever goal is that you want to achieve, keep going, do it. But if it's getting in your way, if it's tripping you up, then you got to think about maybe doing something a little bit differently. I think that's really the barometer.
What does it mean? Is it working for you? Like, it hasn't worked yet doesn't mean that it's not the right way because you just didn't meet that one yet. It just didn't work out. It doesn't mean it's not working.
I don't think the way to measure it is whether you met the person or not. I think whether it's working for you is, do you feel like the best person? I think whether you met somebody or not, whether you met the right person or not is not the way that we're measuring it. Is it working for you means, are you happy with how you're functioning? Are you functioning at the most optimal way possible? That's the way we measure it, not have you met someone or not. So I'm glad you clarified that. Is it working for you? Are you happy as you are? Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Any other questions? Thoughts? Ideas? Wow, was I so quick?
Just out of curiosity,
sure.
If obviously there's no just from your experience, obviously I know already ahead of the question that of course it could work out or not, but I'm curious what you think as an overall, if you have experience with this, someone that's like divorced with kids, with like dating somebody or like marry somebody that like was never married, doesn't know what it is to have kids, and is like, what do you think? Do you have experience with that? Do you think that it's like a really, really high risk situation? Do you think it totally works out a lot? Like, what do you think?
Look, it's not a one size fits all thing.
Right.
I
know.
I've seen all of it. I've seen all of it work. I don't think it's about whether you're dating someone with kids or not with kids. I don't think the issue of kids or not kids is the issue. I think the issue is whether you guys know how to communicate, and that would be across the board with whoever you date. Is the person open? Are you both open to doing work on your relationship? Are you open to getting help in your relationship? Because whoever you marry, I mean, I would say that that's really true across the board. We're all going to need help at various times in our lives, and I think that the more open we are to that, and making sure you're with a partner who's open to getting help, I think is a really important thing as well. Because lots of times I hear, look, I'm dating somebody and I really want to get help for our relationship because I feel like we're not exactly in sync, or I feel like, we just need some help in understanding how to navigate things and whatever. I want to get help, my partner doesn't want to get help, how do I deal with this? And I say, you really want to be with somebody who's open to doing the work and who's open to getting somebody outside the relationship, because otherwise what's going to happen, and I have seen this happen time and time again, is people will find a partner who doesn't want to go get help when you need it, and then things crash and burn because they felt holier than thou and that nobody could help. So I hope, I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I don't think it's a one size fits all thing. I think it really depends. But the more open a person is to doing work on the relationship, and the more that you both are, and I think
It really doesn't matter what the situation.
It doesn't matter what the situation is, as long as you're open to getting external help. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, asking for a friend here. What
Good.
would you find though happy, like being happy?
So I didn't hear the question. What?
What would define being happy in this context?
Which context?
The context of life.
Okay. That's a little amorphous.
The question is.
The talk wasn't about happiness, by the way. Yeah. I feel like.
You said before, is this working for you? Like, are you happy? Is that what you mean?
Oh, is this working for you? So what I mean by, so when I say is this working for you, whatever the heck it is this working for you? What I'm talking about is whatever it is that you're doing in your life, do you feel fulfilled by it? Do you feel like you're your best, highest self? Or do you feel like you're grumpy and crabby and icky and nobody wants to be around you? I think that's what you really need to ask yourself. Is this working for you? Right? Or do you feel you're always like stressed and tense and whatever? That's not working for most people. Some people might not really recognize that. That's a problem, but for some people they're going to be their normal and they're going to carry on that way, right? But I think each person has to really like be honest, open and honest with themselves and say, is whatever that they're doing, is that working for them? And for some people, being grumpy might feel for them like their highest best self because they don't know any different, because they don't want to really work on themselves, they don't want to be honest with themselves, and that's their right. But each person, I believe that, look, we only have one life, we might as well do it right. So why not be our best highest selves? That's just my own personal philosophy. You don't have to own it. Yes.
You just spoke about like the polyvagal nervous system and all these things. So when we've seen friends start dating and then you say like, are you happy? And they kind of like shut down.
Yeah.
Like to the lowest level, like past fight or flight.
Yeah.
And then, but they had like they're not able to recognize if they're happy or if they're not happy, or if they're not happy because of other reasons, or is it the guy that's making them unhappy? And it could go on for months, or it could go on for a few days. Like people can't navigate if it's the guy or the girl that's making them unhappy,
Right.
or if their own life and how they're responding emotionally.
And that is.
So when you say like, are you going out with someone and are you happy or are you fulfilled? What is that?
What does that really mean?
Polyvagal, like
Yeah.
incorporate both.
So I think, and that's a really big part of differentiation, right? It's about really being able to differentiate between, am I unhappy because there's something inside of me that's not really functioning? Is it because the person that I'm with that's kind of bringing me down, or I'm not really able to be my best self, I'm not really able to be fully intimate and open and whatever? And so I think, and that's why really I encourage so many people who are single to do as much work on themselves before they get into a relationship, so that you could, because when you add another person to the mix, it gets a little crazy, right? Like as I started out talking about, it could look like you could feel like you're a part of a two-headed monster, right? And so that's why it's really important to really be able to distinguish between what's my stuff and what's your stuff and
But
what's
then when someone like
impacting what.
shuts down
Yeah.
emotionally, because that's their response,
Yeah.
then how does someone come out of it or recognize it?
Well, it's a really hard question because the question I don't know whether it's because of the relationship or because of something that's being triggered by the
Let's
relationship
say
or
it's
just
something that's triggered by it.
okay.
Like this is an example of
Right. So that would be something I would say that person to do some individual work on because it's probably that would probably happen no matter who they're with.
Right, correct. So how does someone recognize that? They're like in the shutdown state.
If they recognize that sometimes they're shut down and sometimes they're not shut down, and that there's something that's being triggered when they're with that boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, then they really need to recognize that and do some work on it and see what it is that's triggering them. And oftentimes, and that's where somatic work is so great because it bypasses the neocortex, right? It bypasses the rational part of the brain, and oftentimes we can't express verbally what it is that's bothering us because the trauma is inside the body and we can't access it. So we need to access it through the reptilian part of the brain, and the only way to do that is through going straight through the body. So that's that. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
So this might be an unanswerable question.
Yeah.
But anyone who's here, it's because they're like trying to work on themselves, trying to grow. And
Hopefully.
I feel like as it's like something message that I think singles get a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, just you have to work on yourself. You have to find your blocks. You have to this. You have to that. You have to that. And only then will you find your person. But
yeah.
All sorts of people get married at all sorts of ages and stages, all sorts of traumas, with all sorts of blockages.
Right.
So I'm wondering, besides for the answer of like everything's from Hashem's timing, which is probably the really ultimate answer.
Absolutely.
But have you seen any difference in like the people? Because everyone has blockages and traumas.
Absolutely. Married people
no one
too.
gets out of life
Absolutely.
unscarred,
Yeah.
So like, do you have any specific thoughts on why some people get married with blocks and traumas and they both have relationships that are, and some people, and some people aren't yet married and aren't yet finding relationships because everyone has these things, but some people get married.
Repeat the question.
That's like the $1 million question. I feel like you're
I know,
asking.
so
You are really
Hashem, it's all Hashem.
right. I don't.
But it's just funny from your experience,
if
you feel like there's something that does make a difference that, even with all the stuff that every human comes with.
Look, I mean, there are. I work. I mean, I do both couples and singles, right? And so I work with a lot of couples who have a lot of trauma, and oftentimes it's wreaking havoc on their marriage. So I don't think it's about. I mean, I think sometimes. I mean, it's sometimes it's a fight or flight thing, right? So sometimes people who are in flight mode, and they're dealing with their trauma. What might stop them from getting into a relationship is every time they get close to being with somebody, they can't move past that, and so they jump out. That's the only way I could really understand that. And other people who are experiencing a trauma might the way that they might be dealing with that is going into fight mode, which means that they're like going to encounter whatever it is, and they get into it. Not that they should necessarily, right? It's not, So and of course there's the freeze as well, right? So sometimes people get frozen, and then it's hard for them to like break through that as well. But I mean, everyone will experience some sort of trauma. There's big T traumas, little T traumas. It's not a clear cut thing. There's people who get married and they've got trauma up the wazoo, and it doesn't mean that that's a good thing. It's just that maybe hopefully they're working through that, and hopefully they're not affecting their kids. Sometimes they do, right? It's not that. I hope you don't. I hope you're not hearing that. The reason why you're not married is because you have trauma. That's not the message I'm trying to get at here. The message I'm trying to get at here is that we all have trauma, whether you're single, married, whatever the heck it is, right? We all have, and we just need to really recognize how can we be our best selves, right? Because at the end of the day, my hope for everybody is that they create loving relationships, and they feel that they're with somebody that they feel can really hear them, and they can be heard, and that they're with someone who is really open to seeing them and being their best selves. And so what that means is, I'm not saying that you're going to get married and not be traumatized, or that's the aim. It's about recognizing your trauma and clearing it out as much as you can, right? It's not like it's going to be cleared for wood. This is a lifetime of work. I'm constantly doing the work myself. I'm not like, we all have what to do, and I think just recognizing that the more, I guess the more that you're aware of what it is that maybe is causing you to invite various people in who maybe aren't working for you, or maybe doing certain things in a certain way. I'm just trying to help give you different frames of understanding some of the things that you might be doing based on some of the examples I shared today. I didn't even share all these. I mean, there's many examples. These are just some of the most obvious things that I see that seem to perpetuating, and I guess I'm hoping that if you do see some of these things for yourselves, you could say, maybe I can learn from that, maybe I could do something a little bit differently, or maybe I could build a different level of awareness. It's not that, because you're traumatized, that's why. I don't really think that's true. And Agav, I think there's some really, really healthy people out there who don't want to get married because they want to, they see other traumatized, they see people who are traumatized, and they think, why should I get married if I'm really healthy and there's a lot of traumatized people out there? So there's that as well. It kind of, yeah. Anyway.
So I'm curious, as from your experience,
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that like two people want to come together and they both want help. That's obviously the person wants help. Is there any situations that you encounter where it's like, even when they're trying to talk with the trauma and they're both willing to receive the help, that's still just like, you're like, how is this working? It's just like impossible, or like there's a willingness away, and like a kind of like a side question from that. There's a situation where
that's not enough. Oh no.
Added on is kind of like, well, is there ever a situation where you're like, honestly, it's time to call it quits, hit the divorce button type of thing?
Yeah. So I know there are therapists who are like, that's it, game over, why are you together? I don't know that I've ever said that in my office, ever. But what I do is, the work that I do is called emotionally focused couples therapy, right? It's based on Sue Johnson's work. And so what I really am trying to help the couple do is I'm trying to help them to see the dynamic that's been fueled. And one of the most common things that happen is there's often a pursuer and there's a withdrawer. And the pursuer often has a anxious attachment style, and the withdrawer has an avoidant attachment style. And these people somehow seem to attract each other, right? And it's just a common thing. And I think once we normalize what's really happening in the relationship, and we help to see what it is that's coming from their family of origin and what's coming from their dynamic, what's fueling the dynamic, what's making them choose the moves that they're doing, and oftentimes the moves that they take are protective ones. They're not doing bad things to their partner because they're bad people. I think most people are not inherently bad people. I think most of us are just doing things to protect ourselves, all of us. And so I think that when a couple understands that the thing that their partner thinks that they're doing is often, they think that they're doing it because that part of them is bad. And when they realize that each of them are doing things that are protective, that really calms themselves down, and it actually gives them a real feeling of hopefulness. And that's what I try to do with every couple. And I have couples who come to me who said they've been to other therapists, and a therapist said they're hopeless and why they still married and da 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 da. And I'm not saying I'm like the world's best whatever, but what I try to do is I try to find the hope. That's what I'm always looking for. I'm always trying to find the hope. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, but oftentimes people marry each other because they actually like each other, or they did like each other, and sometimes things have gone down the pike that just they've kind of lost that love and feeling, so to speak. And I try to help them remember it and try to make them come alive again. And so that's what I do. I hope that answers your question. Ish. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Those are just the 35 shots.